news coming in out of the White House saying that India temporarily faces 10% tariffs. India's tariffs have been cut from 18% to 10%. Temporary tariffs on countries such as India, the United Kingdom and the European Union nations is what is being said by the White House. And this comes on the heels of 10% additional reciprocal tariffs that have been announced by Donald Trump. This comes about after the Supreme Court in fact deemed it illegal as far as reciprocal tariffs that have been initiated by Donald Trump, and there has been a lot of talks doing the rounds as far as refunds are concerned, are demanding refunds by the President of the United States, saying refund checks to Americans who have been paying for importing goods into the United States. We have my colleague Gauri Dwivedi joining us in order to get us the very latest, and this is in regard to what's really happening. Gauri, from 10% additional tariffs, we are talking about the court ruled that Trump exceeded his authority when he imposed tariffs via that law that reserved only for national emergencies. They say he needs congressional approval to impose taxes on imports. On those grounds, invalidating his measures. The big question being what happens next. From what we're hearing, as far as the White House is concerned, this is really signaling probably a long-term relief, if not so an instant one. But for India, we're seeing not just that the deal remains unchanged, but it's getting even better. It's getting sweeter to 10%.
Good morning to you, Divya, and to all our viewers. What a night it has been of massive developments that have come in from the Trump administration, actually from the Supreme Court first, and then a slew of measures that have been announced, and also the intent that came in from President Trump. Now, Divya, just to put some things into perspective and context, after the Supreme Court struck down Donald Trump's tariffs, called them that they can't stand the test of law, so to say, Donald Trump did announce that he can take some emergency measures, invoking several other provisions in the law. However, all of them are temporary in nature, allowing those provisions to only exist for 150 days till they go back to the Congress for more approvals. In the backdrop of that, fresh updates that have come in indicate that for that for India, EU and several other markets, the tariffs now stand right now at 10%. It is temporary in nature, but 10% is what the tariff right now stays till the time there is more clarity. I'm going to rope in both Lalit Jha, who's a senior seasoned reporter, in fact, in Washington, D.C., who's been covering the power corridors for over decades now. Priyanka, they also joins me on the broadcast for more on this. Lalit, to you first. This 10% announcement that has come in, it's a reprieve. Of course, it's a temporary window, but nevertheless, a huge reprieve coming in for Indian exporters in terms of bringing the tariffs down to 10%.
Yeah, indeed. Yes, it is. As the White House has said, it has come down from 18% to 10%, but it's also clarified that it's a temporary thing. They are looking into other provisions through which they can keep on increasing the tariff on other countries, trading partners, including India, EU, UK, and Japan.
Indeed. Priyanka, you've got your ear to the ground, so to say, in US. A lot has happened through the night there, and it was a long day in America. Very sharp words coming in from the Supreme Court. But the intent that's coming from the Trump administration is very clear, that they are going to identify their roadmap. Their economic agenda remains the same. It is driven by tariffs. Even though in the interim, we will see these huge reprieves coming in for countries like India, where you have the tariff being slashed down from 18% to 10%.
Yeah, I mean, the recent Supreme Court ruling addressed what we have to remember is the scope and executive authority under the IEEPA tariffs in relation to tariff policy, right? So the court determined that emergency powers granted under the IEEPA do not automatically extend to broad tariff actions without clear congressional authorization. So in doing so, the court reinforced the constitutional allocation of tariff powers to Congress. Earlier today, I believe it was at about 12:45 p.m. Chicago time. Lalit, I know you're in DC, so you're a little ahead of me. But in his press conference, Trump emphasized that his administration they still view the tariffs as necessary tools to respond to foreign economic pressures. He also stated that limiting emergency-based tariff authority could affect executive responsiveness in trade matters. At the same time, he also acknowledged that other trade statutes do remain available to him. Section 301 allows action following investigation into unfair trade practices. Section 232 is also there, which permits measures tied to national security findings. Those mechanisms required structured review as well as administrative procedures. So this moment really illustrates an ongoing tension within governance, speed versus structure here. Emergency authority allows rapid response, which we have seen Trump do, but legislative authorization provides procedural clarity as well as accountability, which we have seen from the Supreme Court. So the ruling does not eliminate all tariff tools. It clarifies the pathway, specifically the statutory pathway through which they must operate. So the trade debates will continue, but now within legal channels, defined legal channels, I would say.
Indeed, Priyanka, that's a very good point you're making, and thanks for really clarifying that for our viewers. And for viewers tuning in right now, the big headline coming in right now is that the trade deal reset has been now to 10%. The India-US trade deal, the intent has been announced, but it is yet to be signed in writing by both sides. Ahead of that, final leg of negotiations taking place in US. Indian negotiators are there, and in the backdrop of that, you have that big development coming in where the India-US trade in terms of the tariff rate has now been slashed down to 10%. And I think, Lalit, that's going to have a huge impact in terms of the negotiations. You have our trade negotiators in the US for that final last leg, and this comes in. How big an impact it's going to have on our discussions?
Yeah, definitely it will have an impact. The negotiation would have to take some new turn because the US government would not know under what measures they're going to impose tariff on that. So let's see if there can be a pause as well on the talks, for temporary pause in the talks as well, so that there is more clarity on the US Supreme Court ruling and what the next steps that the Trump administration would like to take on the tariff as well.
Indeed. And we're going to take this story forward. We're going to rope in experts as well to really understand where does the fine line right now stay. But I want to first play out that clippings from Donald Trump's press conference, and of course a reaction from Democrats who are going on saying, Gavin Newsom is in fact going on saying that every US citizen should now be getting $1,700 in return from the president after that ruling. Listening to those reactions, we come back, take this story forward.
Therefore, effective immediately, all national security tariffs under Section 232 and existing Section 301 tariffs, they're existing, they're there, remain in place, fully in place, and in full force and effect. Today, I will sign an order to impose a 10% global tariff under Section 122 over and above our normal tariffs already being charged. And we're also initiating several Section 301 and other investigations to protect our country from unfair trading practices of other countries and companies. The Supreme Court's ruling on tariffs is deeply disappointing, and I'm ashamed of certain members of the court, absolutely ashamed, for not having the courage to do what's right for our country. I'd like to thank and congratulate Justices Thomas, Alito, and Kavanaugh for their strength and wisdom and love of our country, which is right now very proud of those justices. When you read the dissenting opinions, there's no way that anyone can argue against them. There's no way. Foreign countries that have been ripping us off for years are ecstatic. They're so happy. And they're dancing in the streets, but they won't be dancing for long, that I can assure you. They can use other of the statutes, other of the tariff authorities, which have also been confirmed and are fully allowed. Therefore, effective immediately, all national security tariffs under Section 232 and existing Section 301 tariffs. They're existing, they're there. Remain in place, fully in place, and in full force and effect. Today, I will sign an order to impose a 10% global tariff under Section 122 over and above our normal tariffs already being charged.
He's unhinged. Donald Trump is increasingly unhinged. Even his hand-picked Supreme Court said what he was doing was lawless. The tariffs were illegal from day one. A tax increase on ranchers, on farmers, on small businesses, on you and me. Donald Trump should return that money immediately. He has an obligation, $1,751 per family, that were taxed by Donald Trump. Pay us back. Put that money back in the pockets of working families and the American people.
The Supreme Court just confirmed what we already knew. Trump's tariffs are illegal. He did it without the support of Congress or the voters, and you paid the price. He illegally took $1,700 from every American family. That's a tax on working people. Donald Trump now owes you a refund for every dollar of it. America's working families deserve a refund. Cut the check, Donald.
It's now really a matter for the US administration to respond to. What I can say from our position as a UK government is what our position will continue to be, which is to stand up for British businesses and get the best possible deal, because that's what we've been doing throughout all of our discussions with the US administration about tariffs in recent months since the last general election, and we'll be working with the US administration in the future to make sure we get the best deal for our businesses. We're in a position where we want to make sure we're getting the best deal for the UK. We're making the best position for our businesses to be able to export goods that we manufacture in the UK. That's always been our preference. That's always been our priority.
There is Daniel Block, who's a senior editor at Foreign Affairs. We also have Rahul Aluwalia, who's director of Foundation for Economic Development. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on the broadcast. I'll tell you why this story really matters to people in India. And the big headline, essentially two aspects of this. One, what does it mean for the India-US trade pact going forward? The 10% reduction, what is the kind of visibility do we have? And the second important aspect, why it matters to everybody in India, is how long will this trade uncertainty, this tariff uncertainty going to continue? Is this going to increase going forward? Even as the sense that we got was that we are moving towards a certain stabilization of those Trump tariff tantrums, so to say. And those are my exact specific questions that I'm going to put forth to both of you. Daniel Block, let me start with you. First question, what does it mean for the trade uncertainty, which many thought was actually now stabilizing, and it now seems that there is going to be more volatility going forward, more uncertainty, because Donald Trump is clear he's going to continue and his economic agenda is going to be driven by tariffs, maybe invoking some other provisions. That's it.
Sure. I think I can probably answer both questions pretty quickly in one swoop because the answers are related. What it means for the trade pact that's on the table right now, I don't really know. And I don't think anybody really knows because it was premised on a system of tariffs and a regime that is no longer in place. And we don't yet know what's going to replace it. We don't know what's going to come next because in order to enact similar types of tariffs on India, he will have to conduct a formal trade investigation now against India as a kind of preface to and an explanation for why he's putting similar tariffs on India. So then to get to the second question of should we expect the trade chaos to continue, I would say yes. Just because he can no longer issue tariffs by fiat, I think what we're going to see now is an attempt to jerry-rig or retroactively build up the regime he had in place before. But that's going to be a lengthy process. I think that there's going to be a lot of cat and mouse going on with Congress, with members of his administration, with business leaders, with the Supreme Courts. And it will be a longer process. But we know that Trump loves tariffs. He said it's his favorite word in the English dictionary. We know that he's really angry about this court decision. So I think we can expect continued trade chaos going forward.
And 2 out of the 6 judges who voted in favor of it actually are Trump appointees. Supreme Court justices are appointed for life. So 2 out of those are actually appointed by Donald Trump himself. So he has a reason to be anguished there. Rahul Anwale, let me bring you in on the other aspect. There were 2 aspects of this conversation, which is why this is so important for us. The India-US trade pact. We are almost in the final leg of signing it. Our negotiating teams are there. And now we have what may look like a sweetened deal on the table, even though it is for a brief period of time, which is 10% tariffs. Put this in context for our viewers. How should we be seeing this? What does it mean for our trade pact that is almost or on the verge of being signed?
Partly, I'll echo what Daniel said earlier. I think the uncertainty is going to be a big problem here. This 10% tariff, see, I think for India, what matters is our relative tariff compared to our competitor countries. How much is China going to be charged? How much is Vietnam going to be charged? Before the trade deal, our situation was so poor because our tariffs were 50%, China's tariffs were 30%, and Vietnam's tariffs were 20%. And the trade deal was cutting down our tariff to 18%. Now, the new tariff announcement that has happened, the previous tariffs that stay in place are largely anti-dumping tariffs, which are mainly on China, tariffs on steel and aluminum, which India did not export in any case, and this new tariff that was announced, which is a 10% global tariff. So now the task of the trade deal becomes what it always was, get a better deal than other countries. Our tariffs have to be lower than China, have to be lower than Vietnam. That's what matters for us. And we don't know how that will play out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so more uncertainty, even as we wait for more clarity as to what really happens to the trade negotiations, even as the big headline that is coming in is that right now tariffs have been reduced to 10% for India, along with several other key markets. I want to rope in Divya as well to really take you viewers through the fine print of some of the big announcements that have come in so far in the last 12 hours. Divya.
Right. Gauri, there's a growing chorus for refunds of the amount that has been collected over the past 1 year, almost since April of 2025, in additional tariffs that has been paid by American people for importing goods to the tune of 100 billion, something the Supreme Court did not rule on. Of course, we will talk about that as well. But let's just also talk about, the sections that are being considered here and the announcements that have been made. There are 3 big announcements that have come about ever since the Supreme Court has deemed, Trump's move absolutely illegal. Trump there saying that there will be new 10% global tariffs under Section 122. 122 is the Trade Act of 1974 that usually is invoked for serious trade deficits or currency depreciation. Now that is limited only to a maximum rate of 15%, and that also for a time frame of only 150 days. One of the fastest options for implementation. There's move 2 as well. That is tariff under Section 232 to remain in place. Now, what is this section? This is the Trade Expansion Act of 1962 that affects imports that threaten national security, that's been used by Trump on steel by 25%, on aluminium by 10%. There's also the third move, and the third move is new Section 301. That is basically investigations that are initiated. Section 301, the Trade Act of 1974, is a tool for addressing unfair trade practices, requiring a formal probe by the US trade representatives used against China in 2018 for intellectual property issues. So those are the moves. In fact, to know more on this, Gauri Dwivedi back with us. Gauri, the big question really being, while we don't see what's really happening in the long-term future, what's really happening now? What are the instant changes that are coming about, particularly for India, is the big question.
Indeed, it is. Divya, you summed it up very correctly that as things stand, those are some of the big measures that were invoked and those are the big headlines that came in from the announcement made in the US, even as uncertainty remains. And, this is something I want to take to both the gentlemen on the panel, which is that normally one would say that a ruling like this would actually mean reduced political capital for President Trump. But that isn't the case here, simply because he says that he's going to now evaluate other options and he will relentlessly follow the agenda, his economic agenda, which is tariffs led. But at the same time, this does put some sort of a framework in which the executive power will now be bound. And that, I think, is a very important aspect of understanding decision making, legislative decision making to be made going forward in the US. Daniel, you want to come in there?
Yeah, I actually think that one of the biggest stories in the United States coming out of this might not even be the economic implications or the tariff implications, period. It's the fact that really for the first time, this Supreme Court has said no to Trump. We've had a long pathway now here of Trump doing things that many legal observers thought were completely beyond the pale, totally unconstitutional, totally beyond his authority. And the courts, or rather the Supreme Court, largely letting him get away with it. But this is the kind of the first clear-cut case where they've said, no, you've gone beyond your authority. And so that's a huge deal. Now, what it means going forward, I think we're going to have to wait and see. He's clearly antagonized. He's going to fight back. And we don't know yet if this is going to extend to other Supreme Court decisions or if they will go back to having a more permissive attitude to what he's permitted to do. That said, I think the last thing I want to mention is we are at a point now where, you know, for all the power Trump has accumulated, and it is substantial, and I don't want to play that down at all, you are starting to see some small signs of life from other American political institutions. You know, Congress is starting to get a little bit more restless about their authority being stripped away. We saw that with the vote to force Trump's Justice Department to release the Epstein files. So there might be a growing sense among America's institutions that Trump is a lame duck. He's term limited. He probably won't be able to secure a third term in office, although never say never with Trump. So I think that that's an element of the story that's particularly important, at least when you're talking about the domestic.
Daniel, that's an ever optimistic Democrat speaking from his heart there, talking about several of the other aspects. Yes, there are some major issues that have really happened as far as Capitol Hill is concerned, and all of them are going to impact the midterm elections. Viewers, midterm elections will take place in November, and through the course of this year, one may see political uncertainty and turbulence continuing in the US. But, you know, Mr. Ahluwalia, I want to bring the focus back to the big headline that is coming in right now, which is the 10% tariff reprieve that has come in. No matter how temporary it is, no matter how limited that window is, it's a huge reprieve. The fact that tariffs have now come down now to 10% is a huge breakthrough and a huge positive as far as Indian exporters are concerned.
Gauri, I will differ slightly there. I think had this happened 3 weeks ago, I would have completely agreed with you. I think that you would have been absolutely on the nose to say that it's a huge relief. The thing is, a couple of weeks ago, they've already announced that they'll bring our tariffs down lower than most of our competing countries. Yeah. So this 10% is actually neither here nor there for us. Because really think about it this way, right? The 10% or the 18% is being paid by the American consumer. It is not being paid by the Indian business. So it matters more to American consumers. That's why these tariffs are incredibly unpopular in America. If you look at Trump's polling numbers, he does terribly on tariffs and almost nothing else. Which is why I think the 10% tariff shouldn't be viewed as a relief for us. If anything, it's brought us back to a level playing field with China. Earlier, China had a 30% tariff. We had an 18% tariff. So I would say actually it is now, given that our trade deal was announced and our tariff had been dropped from 50 to 18%, it is not particularly advantageous for India anymore.
Yeah. Lalit, let me bring you in on just that aspect in terms of you're talking about that reprieve for India. You want to come in on what Mr. Ahluwalia just pointed out?
Yeah, you're right. This is temporary relief, but there is some silver lining as well. This will give both the countries an opportunity to have a long-term permanent solution and to the bilateral trade relationship, right? I think the two countries will work on that aspect of the trade deal right now.
I think if I just come in on the positive side of it is absolutely that it strengthens the hand of the Indian negotiators to get an even better trade deal. Because now yes, Trump is not on such solid ground when it comes to tariff anymore. So our trade negotiators have a stronger hand in being able to negotiate. So that's a big positive.
That indeed
I'll just like to say that they have multiple options.
Positive. Yes, Mr. Jha, complete your point.
Yes, the Trump administration, the US government has multiple options, opportunities to increase the tariff. They're seriously looking into it, and over the next few days, you will see a lot of other measures they will come out with.
All right. Let me rope in Divya for more specific details that have emerged in the last 12 hours, viewers, because at the end of the day, devil lies in the details. And, this fine print is what Divya is telling us in terms of what are the big headlines, the big numbers, the big developments that have happened so far. Divya.
Absolutely. US President Donald Trump, who's ripped into the US Supreme Court after it struck down his administration's reciprocal tariff, saying that the ruling meant he was not allowed to charge even a single dollar to other countries. So those are the big threats that are coming about by Donald Trump. He has gone on to say that I can destroy countries. He said that I am allowed to cut off any and all trade or business with the same country. In other words, I can destroy the trade, I can destroy the country. I'm even allowed to impose a foreign country destroying embargo. I can do anything I want, but I can't charge a single dollar. That is what Trump is saying. That is the threat that he's making, that he can destroy countries. I might charge even higher tariffs. He's gone on to say, it is my great honor to have just signed from the Oval Office a global 10% tariff on all countries, which will come into effect almost immediately. That is what he's taken to his social media platform, Truth, and that's the announcement that he made about 4 hours after the Supreme Court deemed, his ruling, absolutely his tariff measures illegal, invalidating those measures. Now, I'm going to go in a different direction, is what Trump has gone on to say. He's saying, I'm going to bring in more money than I have done so even before. The decision is stronger than the original move, and that is the claim that he has made. In fact, he's threatening that there will be more tariffs, more money coming in, because he wants to make America great again. All tariffs to remain in full effect is what Donald Trump is threatening with. But the latest is that the tariffs, at least for India, the EU and the UK, is down to 10%. Do remember that India from 18%, at least temporarily, is down to 10%. Gauri back with us in order to get us more details on this. Gauri, of course, the big question really being what next? What can we really expect? Because we really can't say what Trump is going to do next.
Indeed. Trust me, Divya, if we knew that, that's like a multi-million-dollar question, really, that, what will Donald Trump do next? What will his team of negotiators and his government officials actually do? But, let's put that to both Daniel and Rahul in terms of what are the next steps likely to be taken by this administration. It's got a massive blow from the Supreme Court, but it's unlikely to waiver its course because they are very focused on tariffs. But I want to understand from you what could be the next steps for this administration. Rahul, let me start with you, and then I get in Daniel block as well.
Sure. So I think the new 10% tariff that they've introduced is also honestly very, very shaky. It's a very temporary authorization only for balance of payments deficits. So which means that the US has to be in a serious fiscal or financial currency crisis. And we know that the US is not in any sort of currency crisis. It almost never has been since the 1970s. And that's very clearly laid out in the law. So actually, even these new 10% tariffs are on very, very shaky ground. If they're challenged in court, as they're very likely to be, these would also end up being struck down. So they're going to have to look for some new method or some new way to apply these tariffs. Daniel said it earlier, and I agree. Trump is inordinately fond of tariffs. So he is going to try and apply them. Maybe he's going to have to go to Congress to do it. So,
all right. Rahul, I have to hand it back to Divya. There's more news coming in.
Right, we have breaking news coming in, and this is what is being said, that Trump's fresh 10% tariffs should come into effect, and they're going to be coming into effect from the 24th of February. We're talking about next week is when these new tariffs are going to come into effect, and these are temporary tariffs, 10% temporary tariffs in effect for the next 150 days starting from the 24th of February. So that is the breaking news that we have for you after the Supreme Court has in fact invalidated the tariffs that have been imposed by Donald Trump since April of last year, and Donald Trump then ahead has made claims that he can in fact impose additional tariffs, and he's gone ahead with those fresh 10% additional reciprocal tariffs. But we're talking about temporary tariffs to the tune of 10% in effect for 150 days. Gauri, the big question really being that there's a 10% baseline tariffs as far as importing goods into the US is concerned, which also India pays. Now, is this in addition to that or not?
I think the sense that we get right now, Divya, is that it will come down to 10%. Again, the fine print of that is now going to come out in the next couple of hours. In the next 3 days is when this tariff will be levied and will be there in place till about end of July. So that's the 150-day period under which this new tariffs will be in place. If the fine print indicates more TNC, that is something that we're going to wait and watch out for this. But this 150-day period, this window that we have, means that the tariffs will come down significantly. And that is when we will know whether there will be continuation or not. Remember, the clauses that have been invoked by the Trump administration require it to go back to the Congress after 150 days. So around end of July is when there has to be a certain permanent solution around it. But for now, 150 days, which is roughly about 5 months, the Indian exporters are going to enjoy a massive reprieve, which is going to come down to 10% as far as tariffs are concerned, unless there is more in the fine print that indicates any more terms and conditions. But the big headline right now is, in the next 3 days, tariff is now going to come down to 10%, and that is a window that Indian exporters are going to enjoy till the end of July, about the 150-day period.
Right, the prices that will not come down instantly, but the tariffs have come down, at least for now, within 3 days. Gauri, very good news. The deal gets sweeter as far as India is concerned. We're going to keep tracking the story and coming back with the latest, slipping into a short break for now.